Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome to End of Dragons Daily 79. Hope you guys have all had a good week. I've been working away. Keep an eye out for a Best of Guild Wars 2 patches video. I did the Guild Wars 2 lowlights video, obviously, earlier in the month. And if you caught some of my streams, you will have heard me say I've actually had a skeleton idea for a Best of Guild Wars 2 for a while. I'm fleshing that out. And it's really kind of interesting on that one, actually, because there have been a lot of patches that have gone in the game that I know demonstrably are of an extremely high bar of quality. They're fantastic releases. Yet, because of where I've been with the game at the time, my enthusiasm or my appreciation or my, memories of it might not be as high as even much more simple patches from the past. So, and there's a good mix of, content updates that they've done and also, system stuff that they've done. So, I'm really excited to share that with you guys. Not sure exactly when it will be, but I'll tell you, the Living World Season 2 replay couldn't have been better timed. It's such a good initiative. It's really got me into that mindset of earlier releases. And it's always so weird to think of Season 2 as early releases. As you live it and you play through it as they come out, it feels like the game is already quite late in the day. I remember even during Season 2, it felt like Guild Wars 2 had been out for ages already. And now it's just like the slightest little bit at the start of a very long story. Anyway, more on that later. Let's jump in with the concept art. So there's 2 more pieces. Here's one of them. And then we're kind of caught up, and everything that there is to know about End of Dragons so far we will have discussed and gone through. Very strikingly gold, obviously. Yesterday we had the red one, and I said, that feels kind of Luxon to me. Also, you guys had some response to my interpretation of that. I mentioned the architecture looked a little bit Norn-like and reminded me a bit of that. It really does. The building there is just obviously made of stone, but that kind of arch shape and so on. But someone, at least in the comments, mentioned it was more like ship ruins, and that was probably the bow of a ship or something, sitting upright that they were now living in. And that if it was going to look like anything, probably Lion's Arch before it became Disneyland Lion's Arch. And that totally makes sense to me. That works. I would say that in Guild Wars 1, it didn't really look like they were repurposing ships and stuff necessarily. If I'm remembering rightly, there was definitely a lot of wood in their design. But I didn't really get a big nautical theme from their actual architecture. Maybe I'm wrong on that. There were shipwrecks stuck in the jade and stuff, if I recall. Anyway, here we've got a very golden light. Gold is not something I really associate with Cantha whatsoever. Gold, to me, always kind of feels like the gods and the mists. And I suppose the Forgotten to a certain degree. In Guild Wars 1, you think about the Hall of the Ascension, and then you think about in the Mist, if you progressed in the PvP to the Hall of the Heroes, it was all very gilded and so on there. In Guild Wars 2, in the Living World story replay, there's all that stuff about the divine fire in Season 2 that kind of doesn't match, but we go to a cave that's vaguely gilded in the finale that just occurred. And, I think what they were basically doing there is they were hinting that was an Exalted location, right? Because then immediately later in Heart of Thorns, you're going to find a city of the Exalted, and that's all very gilded and stuff with the Auric Basin. So that's what it makes me think of. It's funny, this to me almost feels like, again, a Heart of Thorns Auric Basin type thing. Got those kind of prominent little red mushroomy flowers there. Even the structure of that little river reminds me of the mushroom caves where there's a hero challenge in Heart of Thorns. I do wonder how much overlap there's going to be in the aesthetic between these 2 locations. But I mean, obviously it's not that. I guess it's the Echovad Forest, and it's suggesting of, again, I think maybe something godly, some deeper story. I also mentioned in one of the previous pieces about how it kind of felt like there might be another Kesho there or something, or another Tarir. It feels like there's kind of a window or a doorway in the golden light back there. So it could be that, or this could just be, the sense that light and life is returning to the forest. Speaking of the gods, what if this is like Dwayna's golden light? What if the expansion is going to talk a little bit more about the harvest ceremony and, how that provided a bounty to everyone? What if it talks a bit about just the regrowth of the forest and, areas that we saw like in Guild Wars 1, Melandru's Hope, where there was a little bit of regrowth. And in fact, maybe that's the main thing it's looking at. There's kind of some very stony, cold areas that almost feel like a cave, but then there is greenery there is life, and, maybe that's going to just be a big story of the Echovad, and that's what that's trying to hook into. And nothing really too much less tangible. But, I mean, if it becomes a loading screen or a personal story loading screen, I do think we can talk more specifically about what maybe we're looking at. Also, check out the guy with, like, the big cape. Just to remind people, dyeable back pieces and, like, the whole idea of capes and materials and stuff as a reward scheme weren't in the game at either of the previous 2 expansions. Now they are. I wonder what they'll do with that kind of stuff. Maybe some fun things, or it will just all end up in the gem store. Who knows? Let's get into some of your comments. A brilliant one here from Widenarian. Hey WP, how would you feel if End of Dragons started to delve into the prehistory of Tyria instead? Rather than focusing on the last Elder Dragons, we get a look backwards to the first rising of them and see that the last several thousand years was actually their slow decline. I'd personally love to learn more about where the Elder Dragons came from if we're going to be seeing them on their way out, and it would give the devs time to elaborate on that whole mother thing. Plus, we'd get to see a rare glimpse into some truly ancient phenomenon that would leave the community with things to talk about and deliberate over for ages to come. I think controversy over what we might do and what may happen is the least popular aspect of future Guild Wars 2 content, and unsolved mysteries like the Cliffside Giant continue to capture the imaginations of players for many years. But do you think that the developers would be interested in that, instead of just rehashing things we already know about Cantha? Well, actually, as I mentioned yesterday, I do think the developers would be interested in that, specifically because I think that if they've got talent that wasn't there 15 years ago, or maybe that's a little bit generous, 13 years ago, when they were making factions, right, around 2006, 2007, they might not care that much about this setting anymore. And again, I do think that as more time goes past, more new people have come to Guild Wars 2 who didn't play that either. They don't have that attachment, and leaning too much into the old lore and the old locations, like the power that has, will diminish over time. In some ways, this is the best time to do the Cantha expansion, because if it's any later, we're only going to slide downhill in terms of how many people really are enthusiastic about it as a setting, because those Guild Wars 1 players are slowly going to drop off. And that's fine. That's just a natural course of time passing. So yeah, I think they probably do have great ambition to get forward into new places, but I kind of love what you're proposing here. First of all, I'm very sad that you end up proposing this. You say to me, right on the end of the Elder Dragon story, WP, is it time to delve into the prehistory of Tyria and look at, like, their earlier risings? That makes me really sad, because to me, that is something that probably should have been dealt with a long time ago. You know, I mentioned in my review of the Primordus v Jormag patch that some people will say, oh, it's fine because I'm bored of Elder Dragons, and I say that's just because the studio didn't do Elder Dragons well enough. They didn't explore it well enough. They didn't tell you about it. There wasn't enough bulk. And this is one of those things that I think they dropped the ball on. I think that really, the fact that we haven't heard about where the Elder Dragons came from yet, and they're almost dead, is almost crazy. Like, you would have thought that learning deeper things about them, not like shallow, weird, suddenly constructed MacGuffins that help us fight them, but actual reasons for why they are and how they're bound to Tyria. I feel like that could have come a lot earlier in the story, and I'm even doubtful that it's going to be there in End of Dragons, which is rather funny. There is an opportunity here, though, that I think is quite nice. As I mentioned, I think the game has to move on. I think we do need to go into new places. But to me, Guild Wars 2 is very much about the Elder Dragons. And just because they're all dead, it doesn't mean that the subject material has to completely, hardline in the sand, shift completely away from them. I do kind of view, you know, the next expansion can have that as a big theme. So it still feels very Elder Dragon influenced, even though they themselves are gone. And the state of the world after they are gone, and we are in the end of Dragons, can also, you know, be very, very Elder Dragon bound. And you could probably actually get a lot of stories, so it's kind of like a smooth transition into totally new stuff. And there's another brilliant comment as well that someone's got about, you know, the future stories that we might have coming up. So, yeah, I like the idea of delving into the really early Elder Dragon stuff. I think stuff like the scrying pool that, you know, eventually Aurene digs out a vision that is really goddamn old, is really exciting to me. The scrying pool in general is fascinating. I mean, to think of a world where the Icebrood saga went on full steam ahead, and even there was a Destroyer saga or whatever, and all of it had Aurene giving us Vision of the Past updates. The first Vision of the Past was really recent history. It was about Ryland, right? But what if they'd started exploring deeper lore with it? It would have been a really useful tool. Like, don't forget, guys, during basically the entirety of the Icebrood saga, before this double dragon kill, only half of them were dead. In a weird way, we were only halfway through the Elder Dragon story. And in one patch, or you know, a large patch split over multiple mini-releases, we've gone from being halfway through the Elder Dragon story to one left on the doorstep of leaving. And suddenly, all this detail that, you know, you would have thought would have been there, particularly in the back half, isn't there. And also, by the way, I have to compliment, it's quite an inspired idea, your concept that the Elder Dragons have becoming somehow weaker or less ravenous or less dangerous cycle by cycle by cycle, because that kind of, that's an escape from this weird question of, oh, why did we manage to defeat them all when other people, you know, from all these previous risings never managed to. We kind of had this discussion already on End of Dragons Daily. Some of you guys fell on different sides of it than I did. You felt like there were totally plausible, unique reasons about this rising, why they would all die on this one. But to me, it's like that kind of does a discredit to the size and the intelligence and the scope and the breadth of all these prior civilizations that we don't know much about, that they were just all completely incompetent. That's ridiculous. You give me a real reason now, maybe, by talking about the Elder Dragons diminishing over time, and I would be really satisfied by that. Also, don't let me downplay the studio's competence too much. The mother thing, I mean, clearly is a hint about the origin of the Elder Dragons and that deeper lore, and I very much do expect it to be End of Dragons. It's just I think it's going to be a little note within End of Dragons, not something that we learned a long time ago and we continue to learn more about and fed the rest of the story and was constantly on our mind. It's been like a little tee-hee mystery hint. I'm not sure that was the right way to treat their origins. We'll see. We'll see what End of Dragons actually does with it. Ashley says, what if E is an enchanted book? That would explain what Bobby meant and still leave the plot open for End of Dragons to complete. I don't know. What are you talking about here? Is this just a joke that I'm completely missing out on? Oh, is it because he said that the story was shelved and you put a book on the shelf? Well, look, that's all very well and good and funny, but I kind of like this comment because it can segue me in. I kind of was a bit negligent before. The most interesting stuff wasn't that original quote from Bobby. Bobby had some extra messages too, which were definitely more interesting to read about with E. Bobby is constantly posting on the subreddit, and they're nearly always really interesting things. I very much recommend to you guys to go to Reddit, find his user account and just like follow it, just bookmark it and refresh it every now and then, or go to Guild Wars 2 dev track or whatever, because yeah, he has been talking a lot and engaging with the community with a lot, which is really cool. Anyway, here, over to the E thing. I'll throw it on screen. This is what I should have done on the previous part. Here's a question. Did you guys ever figure out who E is? So he said it's shelved, and this person's blatantly asking, do you actually know who it is? Now, I just want to say, it would have been a mistake for Bobby to reveal this on the subreddit here, obviously. I don't know who would actually expect to get a real tangible answer, but he says that he definitely does know who E is. We've had that plan for many years, just haven't found a good opportunity to pick that back up and move it forward due to a million reasons, but it's on the list. So he talks about it in kind of a concrete way, which is interesting to me because I have kind of felt like they wouldn't know who E is. That they like E as a concept, and that they probably had candidates in mind, but they didn't really know who they wanted to zero in on. And I kind of felt like as time went on and the community started making more and more guesses, or maybe he drifted in and out of our consciousness, maybe their ideas about who E should be is like this malleable thing that they can actually change as time goes by. But no, it sounds like actually there's a concrete idea and they would just go with it, which is nice. I like the idea of things being concrete and things being real, and it's just a matter of when they tell us. And given this information, does that actually change my theory about who E might be? I think actually it solidifies my thoughts that it could be Farron more than anything else. Genuinely, I think Farron is on the top of my list. I'm not joking, even remotely. I think I talked about that with Boots at some point recently on a recent-ish video. Maybe I should go over that again soon. Next, we've got Decal says, if they truly plan to release... A lot of you guys had comments like this. If they truly plan to release End of Dragons in November, it should be called End of Guild Wars 2. Only a fool would release their expansion a few days after the Final Fantasy XIV expansion. Ah, right. So, yeah, I hadn't really thought of this. A lot of you guys did talk about this, the idea that Final Fantasy doesn't really have to care about Guild Wars, but Guild Wars has to care about Final Fantasy, all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think they probably will try to avoid that. There was also a comment where someone said, well, look, maybe it will come out earlier than the full legendary achievement thing. Maybe our sense of what timing is going to be is a little bit off. So maybe November is a bit late in the year. It's funny because that now we're kind of going two ways. If we're assuming that Final Fantasy XIV is absolutely a dead stop, you can't do that. You can't do November because of that. That shifts us either a month earlier or a month later. And saying like December, I mean, I'd buy it. I'd accept that. I think December would give them the absolute best amount of time possible to get everything they can into this expansion and make it insanely awesome. I would be so down for December. But would everyone else be? The one thing I care about is it coming out after. Look, if Final Fantasy XIV releases and then Guild Wars 2's thing comes out 2 weeks later, I actually think that's fine. I think you can go right on their heels, and I don't think it matters that much. What I think does matter is coming out just before Final Fantasy XIV. In that world, everybody's thinking about getting Guild Wars 2. Maybe some people don't even make the purchase anymore, but those who do, get in, they will play this story. This game's philosophies do not lead to people sticking to it very much. And then they're immediately going to go over to a game that offers them actual like vertical progression, all that kind of stuff, and they're going to stick it out there. That would be the doomsday. Don't go right before FF14. Afterwards, I actually think is kind of okay. Especially considering Guild Wars 2's kind of got this idea that you don't have to hardcore it that much. So, if you're actively playing another MMO with all this big juicy stuff going on, you might still consider playing Guild Wars 2 because it's not like it's an epic time sink, you know, and you might consider juggling the two. I think that it will still be okay on the heels, but not before. And then you got the idea of an October release, a Halloween release. This is kind of like what Heart of Thorns did. This would be super soon. And, well, what would you have? You'd have an announcement on July 27th, not the 29th, 27th. You'd have August and September of press and information, and then it would be out. Pretty soon, but I can see it. Maybe. All right, this is one of the weirdest comments I've had. Nikki Wannabe says, "Hey, WP, I just had the weirdest dream about you. You just started a video series where you talked about your relationship with a school teacher who you challenged to turn a green, luscious 3D world into a post-apocalyptic radioactive hell, only with the help of MS Paint. He did by turning all the leaves on the ground brown with the bucket instrument." The bucket tool, you mean? Is it called an instrument now in newer versions? And adding grotesque shapes in the landscape that took forever. Now that I think about it, it sounds a lot like post-apocalyptic Ascalon. The series where you talked over the videos of your teacher had exactly 31 episodes, and at the end, the teacher added his house and his wife explained why their ground level was just a garden hut, but with a normal house floor on top. Wait, it's a house? So it's like a suburban brick house or whatever, but the bottom floor is made of straw and it's like circular, is it? Hope that helps. Keep up the good work. Oh, it helps immensely. So wait, what was this? I was like doing like a trailer analysis of my teacher. What's my teacher doing? Streaming his MS Paint stuff? And this is the weirdest stream, genuinely. I think you need to stop watching videos. I think you need to get off of Twitch. I think you need to go out for a little bit because, my God, I have dreams about people that I watch, by the way, on all the time. If I'm watching an LP and like getting really into it, and especially if I'm watching it on the laptop just before I go to bed, then yeah, you know, that'll kind of dominate my thoughts and come into my dreams a bit. But that is truly crazy. Tana Kalka says, there are a lot of good examples of small pockets of ambient dialogue. My recent favorites, is this still considered recent? Are the retorts between Ritlock, Logan, and Gwen in Dragonfall. As well, haha, WP forgot the audio at the end again. No, I'm not forgetting the audio. It's like there's a mute button that sometimes gets toggled on, and I missed it 2 days in a row. It will not be muted today, damn it. Yes, I think it's still considered recent. I mean, Dragonfall, really, when it comes down to it, I was looking at a page of all the maps in Guild Wars 2 the other day, and, you know, just scrolling through how many vanilla maps there were, and then obviously the expansions and Living World starts rolling out, and it's really weird to look at. It's like Dragonfall, Grothmar, Bureau Drizzlewood. That's it. It's like, whoa, and now here we are. Even though it feels like maybe that patch in terms of real-world timescales was a while ago, as far as Guild Wars 2's expansion's concerned and all the new content we've had to play, I would say it's still an example of a very recent patch. I think that basically everything in Path of Fire I would still consider as very recent, even if the truth is it was 3-4 years back now, which is completely mind-blowing, and we're in the longest gap between big releases that the franchise has ever seen. Even bigger than the gap between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. Now that's a real mind blow. I think you're right that there was some great small ambient dialogue there, and if we're talking about like high stakes stories and how they might crowd out small intimate moments. Dragonfall's got to be the best example of that, right? I mean, that is literally an apocalyptic event, the mists crashing into our reality, an elder dragon baked into the cliff. There's a lot of stuff going on there, a ton of factions of enemies, all sorts, and yet they still found time to do this. I saw another comment as well, which I actually kind of agree with even more. In Path of Fire, next to Augury Rock, there's all those kids at the camp playing a game of Ascension, remember? And they're like shouting out loud Guild Wars 1 skills and stuff. Like that's like a nostalgia bomb for people. It's cute, it's fun, it's brilliant. And there was like a real weight of dialogue there. So I think ArenaNet are good at this stuff. I think they'll continue to be at it, even if we were in a high stakes world. And I think Guild Wars needs to feel high stakes. You know, whatever's going on, you need to be invested in it. It's just, I don't know whether it needs to be about the foundations of our reality anymore. And lastly, here's a comment I alluded to earlier about future stories we can go into. Now, I mentioned on the previous part that I really believe in a new world of exploration. Well, here's an idea that really tethers that to the Elder Dragon story and does this kind of transition thing. Rakiri Doetsu says, "Hey WP, I was just wondering, now that Jormag and Primordus are out of the picture, what's going to happen with the Norn and the Asura? I mean, will the Norn try to go back to their homeland, where Jormag drove them off, or will they stay in Holbrak? Same thing as the Asura. Will they try to go underground, where they used to live, now that Primordus is gone?" These are brilliant stories. And they're brilliant not just because I think they make absolutely perfect sense. Like, if you were going to do a top 5 list of the most natural progressions of the world and what these people are going to do, these would be on it, right? It's not just that it makes so much sense, but they're actually really rich, exciting things to explore. The Asura really haven't had great focus or like a sense that they've been the centerpiece of an expansion or a living world thing. The Norn kind of got the Icebreed Saga, but let's be real, kind of didn't, and we still want some of that. So yeah, these societies are moving and exploring to these new places. Now that's brilliant to me. The idea that we would go End of Dragons and then Living World deals with these races preparing to move on, and then the next expansion afterwards is like, you can have your Depths of Tyria. This is a Depths of Tyria expansion. Yeah, we botched it with the Primordus thing. Don't worry, you can get it now. And the Asura sort of wandering back into these deep, dark places that they haven't been for over 100 years. And, you know, maybe they've been taken over by various things that we haven't seen before. Maybe we find previous old ancient versions of Asura that managed to survive down there. You know, the fallout of these places. I'm not so inspired necessarily about the Norn returning to the north, but I think there's space if they want to do that. I think the more compelling idea is that the Norn, big badass legends and heroes as they aren't interested at this point in really just walking back to where they once lived, but they want to brave new climbs, they want to go to new places, and they're invigorated with the spirit of exploration. And we see the Norn traveling out to new islands and so on, as I've discussed before. Now that, I think, would be really cool as well. Like a brave new world, we're going to a whole new continent, and it's not really with the humans, it's not really with the Asura, it's not really with anyone, except a huge contingent of excited Norn at our side. Now that, to me, that would be very, very cool. So yeah, and I think this is a logical progression that we'll definitely see. Whether it's fully expansion featured or it's just kind of stories we hear about in Living World, I don't know. But that's definitely where you take Guild Wars 2, I think. There you have it, guys. That's End of Dragons Daily 79. I don't have an idea for a big topic. Please just drop an amalgam of comments down below. I'm reading them all at the moment. I'm drinking them all in, and hopefully we can continue to have fun discussion. This series is nothing without cool questions. So if you've got any idea, or even just stupid comments, as we read one of those earlier about dreams, let me know. And I will see you guys for this best moments of Guild Wars 2 video, hopefully at some point soon. I've got some really cool ideas you're about to see too, but we'll kind of follow that. So take care, guys. In the meantime, I'll see you tomorrow for more End of Dragons Daily.